stood the Vaughn residence. Inside lived Gregory and Eliza Vaughn, a couple that, from every external angle, had achieved the American dream. Gregory Vaughn was 47, a tall, broad-shouldered man with slicked-back dark hair, an ever-present Rolex, and the calm demeanor of someone used to power. He was the managing director of a high-end investment firm in Manhattan. Reserved, impeccably dressed, and always on time, Gregory exuded the charm of a corporate statesman. Eliza Vaughn, age 39, was equally captivating. A former art curator from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Eliza had left her job 5 years prior to focus on philanthropy. Known for her taste in fashion and her grace at social functions, she was admired as a hostess, a board member for several charities, and a champion of local art initiatives. Her smile impeccable, and her presence magnetic. Together, they were the kind of couple others envied. They attended black tie galas, hosted charity brunches, and appeared on the society pages of lifestyle magazines. Their relationship seemed like the epitome of elegance and harmony. But appearances, as is often the case, can be a curated illusion. Behind the facade of wealth and public perfection lay a decaying marriage, rotted by emotional distance and a growing void of intimacy. Friends described Gregory as aloof, methodical, and increasingly distracted in recent years. Eliza, once vibrant and full of life, had become withdrawn and irritable. In private, their conversations were short, their silences long, and their touches rare. The Vaughns had no children, a fact whispered about in their social circle. Some speculated medical issues, others assumed career focus. In truth, Gregory never wanted children. He saw them as distractions, liabilities in an already controlled world. Eliza, on the other hand, once longed to be a mother. But that longing eventually curdled into a hunger for something else. Something neither of them could fully name at the time. In the isolation of their estate, with staff paid to look away and neighbors too distant to notice, the Vaughns began to explore a side of themselves they had long buried beneath silk and silver. It started innocently, an open discussion one night over wine and candlelight. Eliza brought up her fantasies about control and submission. Gregory, whose tastes had grown increasingly dominant, confessed his own curiosity about power dynamics. What began as playful banter turned into shared exploration. Reading articles, joining private online forums, even attending a few exclusive parties in the city where kink and wealth collided. It was at one of these parties that a seed was planted. They met a man, faceless in a black mask, who spoke quietly about real obedience, a lifestyle far beyond consensual roleplay. He spoke of girls, young, foreign, desperate, who could be brought in, trained, and made to serve with full compliance. No contracts, no questions. Just loyalty, silence, and submission. First, Gregory brushed it off. Even he had his limits. But Eliza couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea of having someone in her home, someone to control, mold, possess, awakened something primal in her. Weeks turned into months. They researched, browsed encrypted forums, and communicated with anonymous handlers through VPNs and code words. They learned the language of human trafficking without ever using the word. And one night, in the deep silence of their candlelit study, Eliza looked up from her laptop and said simply, "I found her." Gregory, who had just poured himself a drink, paused. "How old?" 20. Ukrainian. Speaks some English. She thinks she's coming here to work as a nanny. A silence fell between them. "Do we really want to do this?" Gregory asked, his voice low. Eliza didn't answer right away. She walked over to him, took the glass from his hand, and whispered, "We don't just want it. We need it." In that moment, something shifted. The Vaughns, once the picture of refinement and wealth, stepped off the edge of morality, and began a descent that would lead to torment, violence, and, eventually, murder. Because what they brought into their home wasn't just a girl. It was a reckoning. The Vaughns had crossed a line, but it wasn't a sudden leap. It was a slow erosion, a gradual dulling of their moral compass, until what once seemed unthinkable became palatable, even thrilling. Following their decision, Eliza became consumed with the logistics. She was no longer the smiling socialite of garden luncheons and art gallery openings. She was a woman on a mission, calculated, focused, deliberate. The fantasy of domination had given her a purpose she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since her early days as a curator, she had something that made her feel alive. Gregory was more methodical, cautious. He handled the communication. Through encrypted messaging apps and crypto payments, he connected with anonymous traffickers operating out of Eastern Europe. Their messages were cold, clinical. Terms like arrival package, training history, and obedience level were used as if they were ordering a piece of furniture, not a human life. Their criteria were clear: young but of legal age to avoid international legal heat, attractive but not too assertive, foreign, preferably with limited English skills, no family ties or immediate dependence. In other words, someone unlikely to be missed. Eventually, their request was met with a match. Her name was Sofia Ivchenko, a 20-year-old from Kharkiv, Ukraine. She had responded to an online job posting seeking English-speaking nannies in America. Her qualifications were modest. She'd cared for her younger siblings, had basic conversational English, and a strong desire to leave a war-torn region. Her parents were gone. Her brother had been drafted. She wanted safety, a future. What she got instead was the Vaughns. Eliza watched Sofia's recruitment video over and over. A shaky recording of a Zoom-style interview in which the girl smiled shyly, nervously clutching the ends of her sweater. Her voice was soft, her answers polite. "I like children. I am very clean. I will do anything the family wants." Eliza paused the video and whispered, "She'll be perfect." Gregory, ever the financier, arranged the paperwork. The traffickers provided forged documents, a visa, a fabricated employment offer from a dummy agency, even references. It cost the Vaughns nearly $85,000 for the service, a price they didn't flinch at. To them, it was an investment in pleasure, a luxury of the highest order. Meanwhile, Sofia packed her bags in Kharkiv, full of hope. She told her brother she was going to America for a new job and would send money back. She had no idea that the employment agency's office address didn't exist. No idea that the couple waiting for her weren't just employers, but predators in designer clothing. When the day came, Gregory and Eliza made the trip to JFK Airport in their black Mercedes SUV. Eliza wore sunglasses that covered half her face. Gregory stayed behind the wheel while Eliza walked inside the terminal with a small cardboard sign. Sofia Vaughn Residence. Sofia approached timidly, dragging a worn-out suitcase. Her expression was a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. She recognized Eliza immediately. She was everything Sofia expected a rich American woman to be: beautiful, confident, and well-dressed. "Mrs. Vaughn?" Sofia asked in her soft accent. "Please call me Eliza," she smiled, offering a soft touch on her shoulder. "Let's get you home." As they drove north toward the estate, past the city lights and into the thick woods of the countryside, Sofia stared out the window in awe. Everything was so large, so clean, so foreign. Eliza turned slightly in the passenger seat and asked, "You excited to be here?" Sofia nodded. "Yes, very much. I want to work hard, make good impression." Eliza smiled and reached back, gently brushing Sofia's hair behind her ear. "Oh, I think you'll make a very good impression." It wasn't a compliment. It was a promise. Inside the Vaughn estate, Sofia's living space wasn't the guest room as promised. She was shown to a small basement chamber, a sparsely furnished room with a mattress on the floor, a single chair, and a camera in the corner that was for safety. Her phone was taken under the guise of helping her adjust. Eliza provided her with a maid uniform, a printed list of house expectations, and strict instructions not to leave the grounds under any circumstances. "You're not just here to work, Sofia," Eliza had said softly but firmly. "You're here to serve. That's what families are. Everyone has a role. You'll learn yours." Gregory, meanwhile, played the role of the detached, quiet man of the house, cordial, professional, distant. He gave her polite smiles during dinner, asked basic questions, and never raised his voice. But once the doors were closed, and the masks came off, it became clear. She was no employee. She was property. Each day blurred into the next. Cleaning, serving, submitting. There was no contract, no paycheck, no schedule, just rules. And soon, punishments. Sofia Ivchenko had imagined America differently. She'd pictured tall buildings, smiling children, freedom, and opportunity. Instead, she found herself trapped in a stone mansion behind wrought iron gates, sleeping in a windowless basement room where the walls were too thick for screams to escape. The Vaughns didn't lock her door, not at first. They didn't need to. They used psychology, not chains. They spoke in soft voices. They praised obedience, discouraged questions, and emphasized loyalty. They called her sweet girl, our little dove, family, and Sofia, confused and frightened, wanted to believe it. For the first few days, she tried to convince herself she had misunderstood. The uniform, the lack of a work schedule, the loss of her phone, all of it maybe was just how rich Americans ran things. Eliza gave her a list of house chores and told her to memorize them. It was filled with strange additions. Always wait for instructions after dinner. Ask permission before speaking to Mr. Vaughn. No eye contact without request. But Sofia, desperate not to ruin her opportunity, obeyed. She vacuumed in silence, polished silverware, learned how to press bedsheets without a single crease. She ate at a small stool near the kitchen while Gregory and Eliza dined upstairs. She was expected to finish in 5 minutes or less. And when she faltered, even slightly, Eliza would gently scold her. "That's not how we do things in this house, sweet girl." It started subtly. Gregory would leave his tie on the floor near the fireplace and expect Sofia to fold it with care. One evening, he spilled wine on purpose, just to see if she would clean it without flinching. She did. The Vaughns exchanged a glance. They didn't just want a servant. They wanted control. And when Sofia began to resist, asking questions, hesitating before responding, they tightened their grip. The next phase began with the collar. It was white leather, clean and decorative, almost resembling a choker. Eliza presented it to Sofia one morning like it was a gift. "This means you're trusted now," she said with a smile. "Only special girls earn this." Sofia tried to refuse. She didn't like the way Gregory stared at her when she wore it. She didn't like the camera in the corner of her room that blinked red when she changed clothes. But she didn't have her passport. She didn't have a phone. She didn't know how to leave. They had stripped her of identity, then rebuilt her as a fantasy. And she was beginning to realize it. One night, after dinner, Eliza called her into the parlor. Gregory was seated in his leather chair, sipping bourbon, legs crossed. "Kneel." Sofia froze. She looked from Eliza to Gregory. "Mrs. Vaughn, I don't understand." Eliza's voice dropped an octave. It wasn't a suggestion. That night, the facade crumbled completely. What followed was a terrifying descent into submission. The Vaughns no longer pretended. They began referring to Sofia only as the girl. They limited her speech to single words. They gave her a list of obedience rituals that had to be followed every day. Gregory began visiting her room at night, claiming to test her loyalty. The horror was both physical and psychological. She was not just forced to serve. She was gaslit, manipulated, broken down. Eliza, at times, seemed to enjoy the mental domination more than Gregory enjoyed the physical acts. Sofia tried once to run, just once. It was 2 weeks after her arrival. She waited until early dawn, slipped out the side entrance barefoot, and sprinted through the thick fog toward the woods that bordered the estate. She had no idea where the road was, but she knew she had to get away. She didn't make it 100 yards. Gregory caught her, silent and furious. He dragged her back inside without a word, shut the basement door, and locked it for the first time. She was beaten that night, not just bruised but shattered. And Eliza was the one who held her afterward, wiping her tears, whispering that everything would be better if she just accepted love the way it was offered. The next morning, Sofia was different. She didn't speak. She didn't eat. She stared at the floor for hours. She was no longer a guest, no longer a hopeful immigrant. She was a prisoner in a gilded home, with a name she no longer recognized, and eyes that no longer saw light. And as the weeks passed, something in her began to die. But something else, something deeper, started to wake. A sense of rage, of betrayal, of quiet, simmering vengeance. The Vaughns had brought Sophia into their world to satisfy their forbidden desires. But in doing so, they had ignited something dangerous, something they couldn't control. And in the silence of her cell, Sophia began to plan. As the Vaughns sank deeper into their fantasies, their polished facade gave way to something darker, something primal. What began as a shared obsession had become a shared addiction, and Sophia was the drug. In the early days, Gregory had been the more reserved participant. He watched from a distance, calculating, observing his wife's growing hunger. But the deeper Eliza fell into her role as mistress of the house, the more empowered she became. And Gregory, long drawn to power, found himself captivated by the transformation of his wife more than by Sophia. It started with control. Then it became cruelty. The Vaughns weren't just living out a fantasy anymore. They were conducting an experiment, one they believed elevated them above the common world. They believed themselves refined sadists, modern gods in their own Olympus, sculpting a soul through pain, humiliation, and silence. Each day introduced new rules for Sophia. She was no longer allowed to speak without being spoken to. She had to sleep naked, at the foot of their bed like a pet. She had to write daily affirmations like, "I belong to them," or "Pain is a gift." When she hesitated or made even the slightest mistake, burnt toast, a misplaced spoon, Eliza would deliver a punishment disguised as correction. One morning, after Sophia accidentally broke a wine glass, Eliza forced her to kneel in a pile of salt for 2 hours. Another time, Gregory handcuffed her hands behind her back and made her scrub the marble foyer floor with a toothbrush. When she cried, he smiled and said, "You cry because you still think this isn't love." At night, the games escalated. They began filming her, dressing her in costumes, making her reenact scenes from twisted storybooks Eliza had rewritten in her private journals. Cinderella in chains, Sleeping Beauty bound, Red Riding Hood punished. What disturbed Sophia most wasn't the acts themselves. It was the joy in their eyes, the laughter, the slow applause when she complied. They didn't want her to suffer in silence. They wanted to witness her breaking. And she was breaking. Her body bore the marks of their depravity. Thin welts, bruises, chafed wrists. But her mind had gone somewhere else. She learned to dissociate. She could stare at a wall for hours. She spoke only in whispers. Her Ukrainian accent faded as she spoke less and less, forgetting words she once used freely. But inside, something remained untouched. Sophia remembered everything, every humiliation, every insult, every promise of love twisted into dominance. She began keeping track of patterns. When the gates opened, when deliveries arrived, when Eliza left her keys on the marble counter. She knew the hallway cameras only turned to the left when motion was detected, and they stayed fixed for 8 seconds. She learned that Gregory slept deeper after wine, and Eliza always turned off the basement alarm at exactly 6:45 a.m. to check the thermostat. They didn't notice how carefully she was watching them. They didn't notice the way her hands traced the edges of doors or the corners of window panes, checking for weakness. They thought they had broken her, that she was no longer capable of resisting. But Sophia had stopped praying to be rescued. Now she was praying for an opportunity. Meanwhile, the Vaughns had grown bolder. Eliza began inviting friends to the estate more often. Private wine tastings, she called them. But behind closed doors, there were whispers. The Vaughns' inner circle was not unaware of their appetites. Some were curious, others complicit. Gregory began testing the limits, offering hints to close acquaintances about their unorthodox lifestyle. One of them, a stockbroker named Lane Carrington, asked directly one night in the cigar room, "You've really got a girl living in the house like that? Doesn't she ever fight back?" Gregory smiled and replied, "Not when she doesn't know she has a choice." But she did know. And one night, she decided she would fight back. It was a stormy Friday evening when the cracks in the Vaughn's fortress began to widen. Sophia had been made to serve wine in a sheer slip, barefoot, while Gregory and Eliza dined in front of a roaring fireplace. Their mood was electric. They had just closed on a second property in Portugal, and Eliza was in rare form, dancing to music, spinning in heels, glass in hand. As they laughed, Gregory ordered Sophia to approach and kneel beside him. Eliza whispered something in his ear, and he chuckled. "You should be proud," he told Sophia. "We've made you into something useful." Sophia said nothing, but inside, a plan was solidifying, every step rehearsed. That morning, she had pocketed a small letter opener from the desk drawer in Gregory's office while cleaning. She knew he wouldn't notice. It was antique and decorative, easily mistaken for a trinket. But to her it was a weapon. As they drank deeper into the night, Eliza eventually grew tired and excused herself to the master bedroom. Gregory, satisfied and smug, instructed Sophia to clean up. It was then, alone, unobserved, silent, that she acted. She moved swiftly, like someone possessed, not hesitating, not trembling. She entered the bedroom quietly, the letter opener hidden in her sleeve. Eliza was undressing, humming to herself. "Is that you, sweet girl?" Sophia said nothing. When Eliza turned, it was already too late. The blade sank deep into her chest, just below the collarbone. Eliza's mouth opened in a scream that never came. She stumbled back, knocking over a vanity stool, eyes wide in shock, more offended than afraid. Sophia didn't stop. She stabbed again, and again. Years of rage, humiliation, and stolen dignity exploded in seconds. The walls were painted red. Gregory found her minutes later, drawn by the noise. He froze at the doorway. Sophia stood over Eliza's lifeless body, her hands drenched in blood, eyes hollow. Gregory's face twisted in disbelief. What did you do?" Sophia raised the letter opener slowly, her voice a low, controlled whisper. "I remembered I had a choice." For a split second, the world stood still. Eliza lay sprawled across the bed, limp, pale, unrecognizable from the glamorous socialite she had once been. And Sophia. She stood like a statue at the foot of the bed, her chest rising and falling in short, shallow gasps, the letter opener still clenched in her trembling hand. Gregory's mind reeled. He wasn't afraid yet. He was still calculating, still trying to convince himself that this was fixable, that it was just another game gone too far, that Sophia, his fragile little possession, would crumble before his voice, as she always had. "Sophia," he said low and slow, stepping inside. "Put it down. We can fix this." She turned to him, eyes dead but calm. "You can't fix her," she replied. "And you can't fix me." He took a step closer. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. The storm outside howled louder now, as if nature itself was mourning or warning. Gregory lunged, fast with rage. A former college athlete, he still moved with a predator's strength. But Sophia, sharpened by months of suffering, ducked low and drove the blade deep into his thigh. He screamed, more in surprise than pain, and stumbled backward, crashing into the antique armoire. The blade clattered to the ground. Sophia didn't go for it. She ran, down the corridor, past the grand piano, into the kitchen. Her hands slick with blood left smears along the hallway walls. Behind her, Gregory cursed and limped after her, clutching his leg, rage boiling into something worse. Panic. She needed a phone, a key, a way out, but everything was locked. She knew this house like a rat knows a maze, because she had studied every door, every hallway, every hiding place. The kitchen drawer. Yes, a steak knife. She grabbed one, turned, and there he was. Gregory barreled into her, slamming her against the refrigerator. The knife dropped. His hands wrapped around her throat, tightening fast. She scratched, kicked, thrashed, but he was stronger. His face, inches from hers, contorted in fury. "You think you're free now?" he hissed. "You're nothing without us. Nothing." As darkness crept into her vision, Her fingers found the pepper grinder on the counter behind her. With one last burst of desperate strength, she smashed it into his temple. Crack. Gregory's grip faltered. Another blow. He fell sideways, crashing into the kitchen island, blood pouring from a gash above his ear. He groaned, tried to rise, and she brought the grinder down again, and again, and again, until he stopped moving, until the silence was real. For a moment, all Sophia heard was her own breathing, heavy, animalistic. She dropped the pepper grinder. Her fingers were numb. Her arms shook. She backed away from the carnage. The shattered wine bottles, the blood pooling on the polished floor, the grotesque scene that was once a kitchen of luxury and life. She had done it. She had killed them both. The masters were dead. The castle, soaked in blood, was hers, for now. 30 minutes later, headlights pierced the long private driveway. It was Lane Carrington, the same friend who'd once joked about Sophia never fighting back. He was arriving for a poker night Gregory had casually mentioned a week earlier. Sophia had forgotten. Or maybe fate hadn't. Lane parked, climbed the steps, and knocked. Then rang. Then, noticing the door slightly ajar, stepped inside, calling Gregory's name. What he found stopped him cold. Blood. Silence. A barefoot girl standing in the hallway, soaked and shaking. Sophia looked up at him, and in a voice like broken glass whispered, "Call the police." Lane didn't argue. He backed out of the mansion, phone in trembling hand. The call to 911 would soon make headlines. Within hours, the estate was swarming with blue and red lights. Crime scene tapes stretched across the grand iron gates. Flashbulbs captured every horrific detail. Officers moved like ghosts through marble corridors, documenting, photographing, collecting what pieces of truth they could find. Sophia was taken into custody, wrapped in a blanket, questioned, examined, photographed like evidence. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. When asked why she did it, her voice was barely a whisper. Because I didn't want to die in that house. But her nightmare wasn't over. Because what the public would soon learn, the documents, the journals, the videos, the files found in hidden rooms, was that Sophia hadn't been the only girl. And what the Vaughns left behind was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Police searched the Vaughn estate and uncovered a hidden basement room with chains, restraints, and video cameras. Footage showed other young girls, some crying, others unconscious. Files on a locked laptop revealed encrypted conversations, flight details, and money transfers, indicating a human trafficking operation. Gregory and Eliza had done this before. Sophia was not the first victim, but she was the first to fight back. In her first official police interview, Sophia detailed her journey from a hopeful immigrant to a sex slave. She spoke of the threats, the manipulation, and the punishments. Her calm tone shocked officers. Psychologists said she had been conditioned to survive. Her statement became the key to unlocking the larger investigation that followed. The media exploded. News outlets across the globe ran the story of the slave girl who killed her captors. Public outrage grew. Protesters stood outside the Vaughn's estate with signs. The internet was flooded with debates, some calling Sophia a murderer, others calling her a hero. Celebrities weighed in. The mansion was dubbed the House of Hell. Sophia was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Her defense team argued self-defense and psychological trauma. The prosecution painted her as a calculating killer. But the jury saw the bruises, the footage, and heard the stories of other girls who had once vanished. The courtroom fell silent when one survivor, smuggled in from Brazil, testified that the Vaughns had rented her too. After weeks of testimony, the jury found Sophia not guilty. She broke down in tears. The judge ruled she acted out of fear for her life. Outside, hundreds cheered her release. She walked out of the courtroom not as a victim, but as a symbol of survival. The Vaughn's legacy was destroyed. Their estate was seized and later demolished. With the help of a nonprofit, Sophia left the public eye. She changed her name, moved to a new country, and began healing. She now works helping other trafficking survivors. Occasionally, she gives anonymous interviews to raise awareness. She says she'll never forget the blood or the screams. But she's finally free.